Okay. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming. I hope everyone's okay. So, yes, I'm Emily, and I mainly work with clay. Um, so, I've kind of always been drawn to clay. I really like its tactile properties, how plastic it is, how you can kind of form it into so many different kind of shapes, um, and how it has such a kind of long history of being used as an art material. I also really like its alchemical nature and how much it changes in the kiln. It's very exciting. Um, so I did a contemporary craft degree, and then I came to the RCA to do an MA in ceramics. Before coming to the RCA, my work was quite rooted in function, and it was quite small scale. So it was really exciting to go to the RCA and be able to kind of push my work into more sculptural areas, and to also experiment making work on a larger scale. So yeah, these pieces here, they're coil built with slabs, and it was really great to be able to use my kind of whole body in the process of making them. And it was quite a durational kind of activity because you could only build about 30 centimeters a day, and then you have to let it go kind of leather hard overnight, and then you can build the next section on. And I was making quite a few at the same time, so it was quite interesting how they were kind of influencing each other. And then this is me glazing it on the left. That's like in front of the kiln. So it was also quite exciting how they changed in the firing, and how like the two ends of that sculpture came together and met in the firing. So it ended up kind of touching. So yeah, that kind of transformative quality of the material, half the time is amazing, and the other half of the time is very, you open the kiln and you're like, oh God, what's happened? But I think not having complete control over what's going on, I really enjoy. And yeah, the firing process is also, as well as the making process being a long time, the firing is like 4 days. So you're kind of on tenterhooks for a lot of the time, which, yeah, can be a bit frustrating. But again, it's kind of interesting to have such a long process of making a piece. And so to develop these forms, I always start off by drawing. And these are kind of drawings of different like geological and biological forms. And I always kind of draw and then make from my drawings, and then draw what I've made and then redraw what I've then made. So it's kind of like a loop, a feedback loop of drawings and forming sculptures. And that kind of is a bit like kind of biological evolution, and my work often tries to evoke the biological. So yeah, so those are kind of the drawings, and then these are the works that I made for the degree show at the RCA. So along with my own body, I looked at inspiration from the botanical and geological, zooming in on the often overlooked or unseen, extracting the wonder and beauty and strangeness that exists just out of sight. I investigate the relationships between the microscopic and macroscopic, drawing on the landscapes around us and the science fiction worlds existing within our imaginations. My work is simultaneously familiar and alien. I'm interested in the entanglement and overlap between the body and nature, and the liminal space between the living and the non-living. And so I was interested in making these pieces in a range of scales to kind of encourage you to kind of walk through them, and for them to have a kind of greater relationship to the body. And I also did a lot of glaze testing, so they have a real variety in surfaces. So some of them have that matte glaze, some of them are shiny, other ones are quite dry. And so I really wanted to kind of enhance the tactile nature of the sculptures. And so these are just a few more images. yeah, I kind of was interested in these kind of crevices and places that you might want to kind of investigate with your hands. Again, kind of enhancing the tactile nature of the forms. And I was also thinking about colour and gradients and kind of reversing a gradient of colour from what you might expect. So being lighter on the bottom and darker on the top. Yeah. And so this is just some images of some of the degree show works, but shown in different places. So at the British Ceramics Biennale and at Modern Design Review Gallery. And it was just quite useful to see the work in different spaces and different contexts, so that to kind of know going forward how I want to kind of show my work. And so after I graduated, I realised I wanted to make some work that was more kind of closely related to a place. And I went to do a residency at Hogchester Arts in Dorset, and it was amazing because Chantelle was an artist who runs the artist program there, and then her husband runs like a ecological rewilding project as well. So it was really cool. I ended up helping to lay a hedge. So it's like a traditional form of hedge making. Instead of trimming it, you lay the branches down in a particular way. So it was really cool to see that they're helping to make sure kind of traditional craft skills aren't being lost. And so while I was there, it was 2 weeks, and there weren't any ceramic facilities, so it was really great in that it meant I just really focused on drawing, and I was looking really at the kind of micro and macro structures there, and it was in the countryside, but it was very close to the coast, and it was on the Jurassic coast, so there were lots of fossils around, and I was quite interested in the boundaries that were existing there between the land and the sea, and the living and the non-living with regards to the fossils, and the ancient and the present. So it was nice to think about those things. So these are just some drawings that I did there. And then when I went back to London, it was nice to think about how to translate those drawings into ceramic works, and to focus on making some smaller works, because although I was making work in a range of scales on the MA, I was really focusing on pushing the big pieces, which were a bit more technically challenging. So it's really good to have the chance to make some smaller pieces. And I was also interested in using clay from Hogchester. So I gathered clay when I was there on the residency and brought it back to London, and experimented firing it at different temperatures. And I liked it at this top temperature, and it's this dark brown, and it kind of bubbled and oozed. So I was using it in conjunction with clay here. And I also was doing a bit of experimenting with concrete and clay in these little cast kind of trunks. I haven't done anything further with that, but that's thought for another day. So yeah, that was kind of the culmination of that residency. And then I also, as well as kind of having my sculptural practice, I have a kind of socially engaged aspect to my practice, and I work as an education artist. And this was a project I did with my friend at the V&A, and it was really exciting. We did it with 2 year 3 groups of kids over 10 weeks, and we were responding to the museum inside and outside, and the architecture, and we did lots of different clay skills with them. We made plaster molds, so they've all got their hands in plaster in that middle photo, and then they did different hand building techniques individually and also in groups, and then it was really nice because there was an exhibition at the end in the Learning Gallery in the V&A, and there were 2 other groups of artists working with other kids, so it was all of the work all shown together. So it was really great to be able to curate their work. These aren't great photos. I couldn't find the professional ones, but you can kind of get a sense of it. So all their drawings were projected onto the objects that they made. That was a really satisfying project. And then after that, I went to Mexico, and I did a 3-month residency, and that was at the Leonora Carrington Museum in San Luis Potosi. And this is an image of the final body of work I made there. So yeah, I had my ceramics in the middle, and then some collages around the edge. And so I was referencing themes in Leonora Carrington's work, as well as those already within my practice, exploring ideas of the unconscious, the alchemical transformation of matter, and the portrayal of the body, as well as local flora, folklore, and micro and macro structures. And one quote from Leonora Carrington is, "The task of the right eye is to peer into the telescope, while the left eye peers into the microscope." So yeah, that really kind of fitted what I was thinking about in terms of structures that you find like within the body and also within the landscape on a much larger scale. Yeah, and I also wanted the room to be pink so that it would kind of heighten your feelings of being immersed in something. So I started out when I was there doing a lot of visual research. I walked around the city, and there were loads of amazing tiles everywhere, so I took photographs of them, and all the colours. It was very, very colourful. And I also looked a lot at Leonora Carrington sculptures, which were in the museum itself. So the middle photo of the looks like a fort. That's like the front of the art centre where the museum is, and it used to be a prison. So it's very nice that now it's not incarcerating people, but it's a place where people can be really creative and free. And so in the art centre there's the museum, but also there's like lots of different buildings around a courtyard, and each of them has a different art discipline within them. So there's like a dance building and a theatre building. And so I was in the visual arts building as a place for making, and it was like quite close to the museum. And there was also in the art centre a cactus garden. So I was looking a lot at the different cacti. So they're on the left. And I was also looking at prehistoric Mexican pottery and then more contemporary Mexican pottery. And yeah, picking up on like the different kind of motifs and shapes that I saw quite a lot. So thinking about spirals and ropes and labyrinths, which was interesting. And then I was doing lots of drawing of all these things that I was seeing. And then I was collaging my drawings, and I was thinking about the surrealists' use of collage and automatism to develop these kind of strange forms, which I then took into the clay. But before I started making anything in particular, I was doing a lot of glaze testing. So normally I'd work with stoneware glazes, which fire to like 1260 or 1240. But in Mexico, I just had earthenware clay and earthenware glaze, so that fires lower. So I needed to do quite a bit of testing in order to know what colours I was going to be able to make with the glazes. But also I wanted to spend some time investigating glaze in relation to thinking about Leonora Carrington's interest in alchemy. And I was thinking about how the kind of quest to obtain a particular glaze colour or texture is kind of similar to the alchemist's pursuit of a particular metal. And I was also looking a bit at Jung and reading about his beliefs on the relationship between alchemy and psychoanalysis, and how the like visual stages of alchemy, so the like blackening to the whitening to the yellowing to the reddening, relate to the stages of like enlightenment during psychoanalysis. So that's why I arranged then these glaze tests in the order of colour that they are in. And it was really nice to use the glaze tests as a final piece of artwork in themselves, so that the kind of process was also, yeah, a kind of finished thing. Yes. And then this is just some pieces kind of in progress. That's me with the kiln on the right, and you can see it looks like pieces are already glazed in there. So often I'll like reglaze my work like up to like 4 times or whatever until I get like the surface that I want. So it can get really quite rich. But it's also inherent with risk, because the more times you fire the work, the more likely it is that it might crack. But I think it's worth it. Yeah, and then on the left are just some other pieces that I was making, and I was thinking about combining my drawings into the ceramics by thinking about like these 2D planes of ceramic, and how the kind of 2D planes are a bit more kind of illustrative and could kind of represent more kind of consciousness, and then the 3D more ripply parts are kind of more abstract, and maybe that's like the unconscious. And then I was kind of using my glaze tests against the pieces to kind of rough out what glaze I might use on them. And it was a bit tricky doing the glazing, because normally I would use like a spray booth where you can get the glaze quite even, but here I was pouring it, so I learned quite a lot, but it meant that you could layer it really nicely, and that led to some interesting glaze effects. And also actually normally I'd like buy the clay in a bag ready to go, but here it came dry in sacks, so I had to like wet it down and then wedge it all, so it was much more laborious than in England, but it was a really good process to go through. It was interesting. So here's just some photos of the finished pieces once they had their glaze on them. And so as I was making them, I like had the collages to have an idea of what I was going to do, and a lot of like visual imagery around me. But when I'm making, I'm interested in how your hands can kind of take over, and it can kind of take the work in other directions that you might not have planned to do so. And another nice thing was that there was a really nice artist who worked there, and she didn't speak much English and I didn't speak much Spanish, but with the like clay as a common like material, we could communicate quite well. So that was quite cool. And I really liked how the like layering on this pink piece looks very much like kind of veins, or quite fleshy, and how the shininess of this glaze makes them seem quite slippery. So I was pleased with the effect of that. And here's just some more pictures. I was interested to leave the blue piece, which I've coil built here. I wanted to leave the coils showing to kind of represent rope, which I kept seeing in Leonora Cotton's work. And just some other pieces. And that's just a picture of the exhibition again. And so I laid out the pieces with the same like colour, going from the like black stage to the whitening to the yellowing to the reddening, to reflect the stages of the alchemy. Yes. And then after the residency finished, I travelled around Mexico, and I visited quite a few potters, and this was in Oaxaca. And Oaxaca, this town, is like really famous for making this black burnished pottery, And so we visited this lady, and she showed us her techniques. And this is the kiln, that kind of middle picture of the kiln with work in it. And then we went to another town as well, where a lot of people make the ceramics with all these spots all over them. And the jaguar is quite a common motif, and it's very symbolic in Mayan culture, as it symbolizes like a shaman or a king. So it's quite interesting how like mainly this is being made for tourists now, but through the tourism it's kind of keeping the ceramic tradition and some of the like Mayan stories like alive through that. And it's also kind of interesting just thinking about kind of craft and art, and how a lot of people in those towns, because everyone's using the same kind of like techniques, everyone's using the same clay because they're all digging the clay from like the same spot, and the same kind of designs. So that's kind of it's like craft really. But then there are people there who are like really pushing the boundaries of what those designs are, and like even though they're working within like quite a confined tradition of what they're doing, they're still like pushing the boundaries. Yeah, and it was also pretty cool that they are like digging the clay really close to where they live, which is very different from in England where you buy it in a bag. So yeah, and then when I came back from Mexico, in January, I started being family artist in residence at Camden Arts Centre, and so that was for like 12 Sundays, but it got cut short because of coronavirus. But it was planning drop-in sessions for families, with like themes relating to my practice, and also the practices of Vivian Suter and Athanasios Argianas, whose works were on show in the gallery at the same time. So we were covering lots of different things, like themes of micro and macro structures and layers, and it was really nice because it was in the drawing studio, so it wasn't very ceramic focused at all. So I was really like pushing the drawing part of my practice, and we did some like printmaking but using styrofoam instead of lino, so it was quite good for thinking about ways to make some art processes more accessible. And it was nice because it was a really big space, and normally my studio is like a desk, so it was good to be able to think about making drawings on a large scale. And actually then lockdown happened, and now I've been doing quite a lot of drawings and thinking about scale. So these are just some drawings that I've been doing. So I'm based in Somerset at the moment, and there's some kind of ancient woodland at the edge of the garden. So I've been looking a lot into the folklore and biology of ferns, and making drawings and doing some lino prints in relation to that. And then I'm going to take them into clay at some point soon, but I haven't got around to doing that yet. And then also I've been building a kiln with my boyfriend, and we've used clay from the edge of his garden, so that's just like digging the clay there, and then we've mixed it with like a grog and sawdust to make it a bit stronger, and then we've coil built it, and it's about a meter and a half, and we wanted its form to kind of reflect all the organic forms of the woodland, and then when it fires, all the steam comes out of the chimney and it looks kind of magical. But it's interesting because it's kind of like made me think about what other things I could do in my practice, and I'm kind of interested in maybe making some large sculptures out of clay in a site, but I wouldn't need to fire them in another kiln. I could just fire them by having like a bonfire on top of them, and I like that we've used clay from the local area. Um, yes, I'm kind of finished. Oh, I spoke really quickly. I'll stop sharing. Oh, that's a video. Sorry.
Would
Okay.
be, he says, gallery view. Is everyone unmuted? Or you can unmute yourself. Unmute all. Yeah. Thank you so much, Emily. It was
That's
really great.
okay.
We're so
Sorry,
busy.
it was a bit like speeding through. Oh, I need to slow down a bit.
Does anyone have any questions?
I don't have a question, but I love the kiln. I think it's wonderful.
Oh, thank
Absolutely love
you.
that.
What are the
Thanks,
constraints?
yeah.
Can you make that? Could you do that bigger and just keep making bigger kiln? What are the constraints for kiln making?
Well, I think you could make it bigger. Like it does have some cracks, so I think that's just the main thing, that the bigger you go, the more likely that there's going to be some cracks. But yeah, it could definitely be bigger. And if it was a sculpture that you didn't want it to function as a kiln, it would be way more, like you'd be way more free to do whatever you wanted it to look like. Because this was actually quite difficult, because Jack kept saying like, we need like the space that you put the wood in, like, needs to be a certain size, and then I kept wanting to add stuff, and he was like, no, the chimney's going there. So that was a bit frustrating.
How long do you think? How many firings do you think you'll get out of it? Or you just don't know? Like
I
take
don't,
it.
yeah, we don't know, because I mean, it's quite thick, so that should help it like not crack too much each time. Um, but yeah, don't know. Hopefully, quite a few.
Can you also make pizza inside? Is that true?
Yes, no, the top, the
Yes.
top part is a pizza oven. You can't see from that angle, but we've made it so there's like a little chamber on top, and then the bigger chamber is where we'll put the ceramics. So yeah.
It's so great making it. I've made a kiln before, but out of like a barrel, so it's really cool to make it out of clay. So it's great that like all the same material, and then adding in pizza, obviously amazing.
Yeah.
Oh,
It kind of lost its way a bit, because we were thinking originally it would be nice if it could have like seats or something, so it was like a real like communal kind of sculpture. So if we made another one, it would be nice to think about, yeah, what other kind of purposes it could have, as well as pizza oven.
are you interested in combining those? Because you've obviously been doing more educational projects, but do you see those as quite separate to your practice or very entwined? Um,
Well, it kind of depends, but like something like this, like I'd love to like turn this into like a socially engaged project and like do this with other people, and then also then like have a part of the project that then we are making stuff to then put inside it. Um, so yeah, I think, yeah, often it's kind of distinct, but if there's ways that I can like bring them together, then I'm always like really up for that.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I
Yeah,
feel like I saw a question come up
got one
in
in
the
the
chat.
chat. Yeah, can you elaborate about your work at the RCA, the process and the scale?
Yeah. Oh yeah, sorry. I was a bit like speedy at the beginning. Um, yeah, so they're like coil built, which is like where you have sausages of clay and you like work them around to like get taller. But because to like speed up that process, I did it with slabs. So um, yeah, using like big slabs and then like stacking the slabs on top of each other, so it's still like a hollow form, and then like kind of sculpting it when it's still like quite plastic, with a sponge to like get the like ripply shapes. But yeah, because it so they're like my height, the big ones. Um, and so yeah, because of that, you can just build about like 30 centimeters a day. and you just like need to leave the top rim with some plastic on so that then you can join the next layer on a day later. And then they had to dry for like a month before they could go in the kiln. And it was then like a really slow firing, so that if there was any water left, it could like leave slowly without it cracking. Yeah.
And there's another question. What are your plans for what you'll fire in the kiln?
Oh yeah. Well, I've kind of had a bit of a digression into making some kind of functional things that are quite sculptural. So I'm going to be firing them. I don't know. I could maybe share my Instagram, which has, but still kind of looking at these forms which are like bodily and geological and very sorry. How do I?
Is it? If
Yeah,
it's us.
sorry. Oh no,
yeah.
wrong one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been making these pieces. So this is kind of like it could be like a stem vase, but it's also quite sculptural. And like this. I was looking at sea cucumbers there. So yeah, I'm always interested in forms which you can find on like a really small scale, and then they seem like really weird and alien when you enlarge them. Yeah.
I have a question. Hi, I'm Abby. Hi, Emily. Sorry, I had my battery ran out at the beginning, so I missed the very first bit of what you were talking about. But I don't know if you did a BA in ceramics before you did your RCA course. But I guess I'm interested in the RCA course, particularly, and like how you feel, like what you thought the main like benefits of doing that course were. Was there opportunities for obviously developing your practice conceptually, but like how much would you say like the scale of the kilns and the technical advice and stuff, like how much opportunity is there for that? I personally I did a fine art degree and I learned ceramics via a technician, but I never did a BA in ceramics, and I'm considering doing or applying for that course. I'm just I've had a few different people tell me different things about like how much opportunity there is for actually learning some of the technical craft elements of ceramics in that course.
Yeah, I did a BA in, it was like contemporary craft, so we did do some ceramics, but it wasn't particularly in depth at all. And then I worked for some like different potters when I left uni, so I kind of learned quite a lot from them really. But the MA, I don't know if it's changed. I think it's like changed already since I graduated in 2018. But when I was there in first year, like there was a lot of technical support. I think probably less than there had been, but I still felt like it was really useful. We had in the first year actually we had like a series of projects and a series of short courses. So we did like mold making and glaze technology and hand building and print and ceramics. So we did have some like real hands-on ceramic technical experience. But actually also the studio that I'm in now, Tanner's in the same studio. I don't know if you can see her on the screen.
I can, yeah, sorry. My other battery is now going to die, so I'm just going back inside to plug myself in. I'm listening.
Yeah, so yeah, basically, the studio that we're in now, we're like hoping to do some like courses and more like specific like ceramic-y kind of stuff. So yeah, if you're interested in doing more ceramic things, you could follow us on Instagram, and
I will.
Yeah, but I don't know. I think maybe it's best to talk to some students who are still there at the RCA at the moment. Yeah, I don't know. And like the tutors were amazing, like in terms of technical stuff, they were really really good. And the kilns were really big. Our kiln in the studio that we have at the moment is still quite large. It is, Tana's just told me, 120 by 92 centimeters. So it is big, but it just costs quite a lot to fire.
Yeah.
But yeah, they did have really good kiln facilities at the RCA.
Yeah.
So it's like, that was really good. Yeah.
Thank
Ah,
you.
Dean, you're a current student, so maybe you could
I think-
tell
I think
Abby what it's like.
Oh
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Sorry, we met.
yeah.
I
I
was
thought you
intentionally
were
I was intentionally keeping quiet about it, Alec.
Hi, Dean.
I've got mixed feelings about the course. I don't know if I'm the best person to speak to about it.
I've heard. Well, that's the thing. Like, I've spoken to a few people who various sort of different times ago. But yeah, some people are like rave about it, and some people don't. So.
Yeah,
And
the
obviously,
short courses are still running. We were able to sign up for 2 of them. So I did an amazing glaze course with Louisa. I can't remember her surname. She teaches in Brighton, and that was yes, that was amazing. That was really yeah. I learned a lot. But I found that yeah, technicians are great. I think you just need to really a lot of self-learning. I think on most MA courses, really, isn't it? It's that
yeah, that's it.
I think that I went there maybe a bit too soon before I really knew what I wanted to do, and I think actually, I don't know, it's always easy to like reflect and think other things, but I think maybe it would be better if I'd have gone like knowing a bit more about what direction I wanted to go in, because yeah, I think you have to fight much more now for like time and resources and stuff. So if you kind of go and you're still a bit like, what am I doing here? You kind of can't maybe make the most of what it could be. I don't know if that's good advice, but
yeah,
I think it's kind of what you I mean, it's different probably on different courses, but definitely within sculpture, which I graduated this time last year, it's definitely what you make of it, like your attitude. If you get involved with in any institution, if you get involved with all the like potential to complain about everything, then you get sucked into that. Or if you're just like, well, it's not perfect, no, but if you go and you try, and I did so much there, I like used all the workshops, spoke to all the technicians, applied for like any teaching opportunities that came up, and got a job as a result somewhere really amazing, and I've been working there for a year, and like I feel like I got so much out of that course, but equally I think you could not get.
Yeah, that's reassuring.
You could
I
go.
was the same when I was at Chelsea. Like, I just like, yeah, just technicians are like gold dust. Like, I was just like spend all my time with every single technician. So that's reassuring. That's reassuring. Thank you.
The facilities and the technicians are beyond anywhere I've ever stepped foot in. It really is incredible. The knowledge in that place, and the tutors as well, the visiting tutors, but it depends how much you are willing to try and access that and things. Oh, we've got another question. Did your residencies influence the colours of your glaze?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I was doing a lot of visual research. Yeah, like the one in Hogchester, yeah, like using the foraged clay as a glaze on the work, and then a lot of the drawings I was doing, it was winter time, so it was all like dark green and kind of murky colours. And then in Mexico, yeah, the colours were like so bright and in your face, and it was amazing. And then like reading about the kind of alchemy and the colours used to represent things in that, that also kind of came into it. But yeah, I think definitely just there being like so many bright colours in the town where I was, that definitely influenced me to go really bright. And also it was cool because I hadn't used earthenware glazes so much before, and I think you can make brighter colours and more intense shades, so that was quite cool to discover that. Yeah, and also I was using like different stains. Yeah, so normally it adds stains or oxides to a glaze to make the colour. And yeah, I was using Mexican ones, and they turned out to be really good. Yeah.
Have you got any other places you'd like to visit, or residencies, or kind of connections you want to?
I'd love to do. I really want to do a residency in like some kind of botanical garden or something. But I need to like do some research. I haven't seen anything in in a botanical garden. But I was meant to do. I applied for a residency in an orangery in Derby, but they didn't get their funding from the Arts Council, so I don't know if that's going ahead or not. But I hope so, because that would be really good.
I can imagine you being in some sort of lab somewhere as well, like working alongside scientists. It's cool to do like a residency, and maybe I can get you put in touch with a few scientists I know and see if there's
That would be cool.
like
Wow,
a biologist, or I don't know, be
that would be
interesting
great.
to see what would happen in that situation.
Oh, I'd love that. That would be really interesting. I'd like to, definitely be interested in the collaboration.
Another question: would you do workshops with adults?
Yeah, actually, we're trying to organise more workshops in our studio. So yeah, we were thinking about teaching adults, as well as kids, families. Yeah, so yeah, definitely.
Would you say these collective studios are kind of the norm now for ceramicists, or do some people kind of set themselves up completely on their own, or is it quite typical to kind of go into spaces?
I think a lot of people share a studio. It's really expensive to buy a kiln. We just bought a second-hand one, and it was like £800. So yeah, if you weren't getting a second-hand one, it would be really expensive. So I think it's pretty useful to have a shared studio, and also it's just nice to be able to chat to people and make connections and stuff. I think like that's the main thing I miss from RCA, really. Just being with other people and kind of always talking about what we're making and things. So it's nice to have that a bit in our studio. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems to be cropping up all over the place now. There's so many around, like different ones around London. These like bigger ones, and like.
Yeah, ceramics has definitely had like a revival, like with lots. Like Turning Earth and what's the other one? I can't remember the other one. Yeah.
Any last questions? I feel like I've been asking loads, but they've all been on the chat, not just I've been adding additional ones, but questions. Any final questions from anyone else? Okay, we do this every time. If everyone can unmute their microphone and just give Emily a big clap. And thank you so much.
Thanks for coming, guys.
Thank you. Recording.